One. All right, so I'm Raj Singh from the Internet Society, filling in for, obviously I'm not Maarten Botterman, but I am filling in for him as he couldn't make it. We only have one. All right, so I'm Raj Singh from the Internet Society, filling in for, obviously I'm not Maarten Botterman, but I am filling in for him as he couldn't make it. We only have 1 hour for this session, so I will not read out bios. I will ask, as people speak, they can very, very briefly introduce themselves as to who they are and what they're going to be presenting on. Maarten, we'll start off with Maarten giving a brief overview of what this session is actually about and the work he and others have been doing for quite a while around this topic. After that, we'll have Hiroshi Esaki speaking. After that, we will have Narelle Clark, and then we have 2 other colleagues who are joining us online, Dan Caprio and Matt Tat. And they will, of course, be adding to the conversation and offering some of their perspectives and views on what we will be hearing from Hiroshi and Narelle, and of course, their own input into this. So, in the interest of time, Maarten, will you please introduce this session?
Thank you very much, Raj. Also, thank you very much for stepping in. I couldn't think of a better man, and I know of your specific interest in IoT next to all you do. I'm also coordinating the activities of the IGF Dynamic Coalition on Internet of Things. And what we're trying to do is to collect insights from different regional IGFs that we will bring into Kyoto this year's IGF, as to progress our understanding of what those global good practice in IoT look like. So very quickly, IoT comes, like any new technologies, with new opportunities and new challenges. New ways to address societal challenges, as well as with governance challenges. And as with any technology, it's important to understand that technologies are not good or bad in themselves. It's how we use them. Hence, thinking together about how does good global practice look like, because this is technology that goes over across borders. And if we know what we can expect from each other, that is to the benefit of all. Specific societal issues I already mentioned. A very clear example on the global level is the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And what we see is that there's many to which IoT makes a difference. I'll just pick out for the sake of time. One is food, where we see that IoT devices in combination with computer models and whatsoever can improve the crop results dramatically, because it can watch what the crop needs in terms of water, in terms of feed, in terms of exactly the right level of pesticides when necessary. Another one is for everything to do with the sea, land, etc. It's getting a feel for how clean things are. It can help us monitor much better than people can. Many applications. The buoy you see is tsunami warning. The chip you see on the bottom is in fact something from an entirely different level. It's what can go into your artery. So if pressure changes in your artery, it can predict that you will have a seizure or heart attack or things like that, and take proactive measures. So it's a wide range of things. This is important to understand, because if you talk about IoT and about IoT security and safety and some more, what we will talk on later, it's very important to understand the context of the use of that. And you will hear more of that. So these slides are available. Where are we currently? The good practice principle that we see is that we aim at developing IoT systems, products, and services, taking ethical considerations into account from the outset, both in the development, deployment, and use phases of the life cycle, and thus find an ethical, sustainable way ahead, using IoT to help a free, secure, and enabling rights-based environment. So a world we want. And the thinking in summary is first to embrace IoT to address societal challenges in an ethical way. Second, to create an IoT environment that also encourages investment, because without investment, IoT will not happen. And ensure the emergence of a trusted environment, which means you have a need of meaningful transparency, clear accountability, and real choice, no lock-in. So, last but not least, as Raj said, and back to you, Raj, the focus is to secure IoT and empowering users. It's really about framing it right. And Hiroshi will go into that with his current leading edge practice presentation. And labeling it right is as important. And as you will understand, labeling doesn't make sense if there isn't a certain standard and certification to that. More of that in the second half hour of the session. So with that, Raj, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maarten, for that overview of what's been happening and some of the work that's already been done and what we intend to do going into the future. So as Maarten indicated there, the two presentations we'll have today will offer two perspectives. You know, we can't talk about everything about IoT. It's a large space as well if you start drilling down to it, as Maarten alluded to in some of his slides. So the basic plan is I'll get Hiroshi to present, and then what we'd like to do is to then just pause there for a moment and see if you have any feedback or questions, just a couple of minutes. Then we'll go to Narelle and we'll do the same thing after our presentation as well. Just so that it's not just a whole bunch of talking heads in front of you, and perhaps some of you may have some value to add to the discussion, or indeed challenge some of what's being offered to you today. So with that, Hiroshi.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, I'm going to sharing our experience with IoT. First one is most of the people here would be IT people, so we have to invite OT people, like end user. OT means operational technology. They don't use the same language. They have a different terminology. That's the problem. I mean, they have a different culture with us, so we have to talk with them and invite them. This is the old day, 20th centuries, IT or ICT, only using computers with the electronic document. So we are going to IoT arena, IP for everything. Then what we have to realize is not the things are connected. Functions or virtual digital machines going to be connected. I call it Internet of Functions. Then new idea going to come out around us, the zero trust. But because of everything going to move around, every virtual digital device going to move around over the globe, we need zero trust for the system design and implementation. The other requirement by the human being is not only the money, but carbon neutral for our Earth. That's a different PKI we have to preserve. Then we think about what the kind of thing for the carbon neutral we should do by IT or of IT. I mean, the devices must less energy consumption. The digital technology is going to be able to contribute to the carbon neutral by digital twin and the cyber first with using the technology of the digital technology at the first. So this example, about 10 years ago, I hacked my building on university campuses using TCP/IP. Then with the digital twin, more than 20% energy cut in average, 30% energy cut in peak. It was 10 years ago, right? Using digital technology, digital twin, and then we can control energy consumption in our campus. What we did during this implementation is using LLD, linked open data. That is, most of the OT industry never think about this LLD, right? And also data-centric transparency of the data to everyone, not for only the vendor. You individually be able to use the data, access the equipments, and independency of the software or application from hardware. That is a completely different culture in the OT people. We Internet people really know this, and we achieve this environment that never happen in those people. So what is IOF, as I mentioned? That's just simple. This is 20th century's car, isolated, silo structures. Then it's going to get changing to kind of platform. It was happened already in the EVs or smart cities. That is what we have to do, similar to the internet did, right? And also, you are thinking about this is very important perspective. The cost of sending the material by digital bit or physical material or even electricity is very large or very small for the digital technologies. That is very strong impact in the economical impact as well as a carbon neutral to the earth. That you can think about. Once you're building a new infrastructure, first you should think about how making a digital infrastructure be replacing existing physical transportation or electrical transportation. And then the last one is the zero trust thing. Because of the desiloing of the existing system, as I mentioned, and we must use big data or AI, then we need zero trust for cybersecurity. This is the use state. The system was isolated or side, stop and pipe. It was a big hurdle for the big data. Then the data going to independent from things in pipe. Though vested interest, that was our hurdle to disrupting those existing very bad structure. We must change. It was the internet did, right? And also what happened around us by the virtual machine or cloud computing thing. Internet things going to internet functions, virtual machine, virtual process, be able to work around over the globe, right? That is, then we must have 3 design principles, I believe. That is, cybersecurity is mandatory because of the changing the whole of the structure of our system around us. Therefore, we need a security by design first. This well-known sharing idea. And also, different from the kind of firewall or boundary protection. Of course, that is important, that's never worked perfectly. We must have the trust. Every single device, every single person must have cybersecurity, installation or concept or understanding. Otherwise, it's going to be disrupted. So that's the reason why the Narelle working on every single IoT devices must have basic security installation or implementation, right? The last one, that is important point for the IGF. Self first, group second. The last result is public. Once we changing this order, bad thing gonna happen, I believe. We can trust the public, basically. We cannot trust government. Of course, we want to trust them. The first thing, we must trust ourselves. That is their trust. Right. We must have the community be able to sharing those experience and principle and helping to each other. That's a collaborative security by community. Then the community be able to enhancing, as I mentioned first. We are IoT community or IT communities. We must invite other people who are going to use digital technology. Then we must enhancing the groups going to working together. Right? Though the important thing rather than the community is individuals. That we must have very basic education or training and sharing those ideas. The last one, this is the self first, group second. public is last resort. That is I want to share today very importantly. This is the what we make a draft on 8 years ago. The cybersecurity for the internet. That's now I sharing not only the internet. I'm sorry. The internet was only for computers. It was the past. The internet is going to expand in arena, not only from the you say computer to IoT or things going to be defined in digitally, which is not the hardware or kind of digital hardware, not the physical hardware, virtual machine or Dockers, whatever. So that is our world we must think about. So the other new 3 principle is, as I mentioned first, mobility of the things and functions. That's a different thing from 5 years ago. Virtual machine, process migration, be able to do every single devices. The difference is about 12 years ago, we use cellular phone, right? We cannot put application by yourself, right? Carrier defined software. You cannot install your own software. What the different change by the smartphone, you can put any software, whatever. Of course, some company want to control, though the other implementation, you can install anything, any software, whatever you want, which means the hardware smartphone is kind of platform, be able to put any digital devices on it. Then we must assume update and upgrade like a smartphone is a given condition. The reason why we need the trust. The last one is every single device going to be connected to powerful artificial intelligence. In the front hall or back hall. That is the next our agenda. We must think about how live with AI. Okay, this is my practical experiences I want to share with you. The first one is new stakeholder, OT people. They use a different language. They have different cultures. We must invite them. IoT is going to mutating to IOF. Zero trust. Cybersecurity is quite an important function we must install in the world. The last one is the Earth requesting to us new KPI, that is carbon neutral. How use digital technology to the carbon neutral is the thing. You forget my slide. Things, mobility, power mobility is very, very expensive. Order of magnitude, they're expensive. The digital bit transfer is quite cheap, quite effective compared to that. That is digital first design we could do in the 21st century. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Hiroshi. That I think was an interesting presentation. I guess the thing that struck me was Internet of Functions. But it also makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? Because you may have a thing which may do multiple things. Therefore, what it offers is perhaps different functions. So some great food for thought there. Before I turn to the in-room audience, Maarten, do we have any comments from our online participants?
So far, none. Everybody, please feel free to either raise your hand and you will be invited, or place a comment in the meeting group chat, and we'll take it forward. But
okay.
Thanks.
All right. Anyone from the room with any feedback or questions? Holly, we'll need you on the mic because of the streaming, please.
I come from a very different perspective, and that's probably privacy. and Zuboff's data capitalism, our corporations increasingly are dependent upon the collection and abuse of personal data. And you're talking about building this on security and trust. You're going to have a privacy regime that's even stricter than what the EU has, because right now, I think a lot of us are going to go, well, I'm not buying into that because the protections aren't there and the trust isn't there. So what kind of privacy regime are you going to have that there's not the misuse of data, which is endemic to business these days?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The privacy issue, how to ensure the privacy is a very, very important technological challenges we have. Then we are long time working around LOD, linked open data. Then the discussion was every single data has a property. Who can access? Who can use, right? That is technically, we are trying to define every single data has such a property. Then the authentication, authorization, quite important at a technical point of view. Though, another important thing is governance or regulation or rule. Who can access, right? That's the reason why I put on the table in front of you, self first, community second. The last one is government. Once the order is going to be changed, flipped, it's going to be bad thing. We must protect our data by ourselves. That's the first thing. So it is not enough. We need a help by community in order to enhance your experience or way or methodology. Then the last one is the government. Government is not all is bad. There are some people who are good. They may want to help us. So that is a kind of multi-stakeholder discussion among us. That's my answer to you. That's enough.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to Narelle.
Can I come into
yes, Maarten,
the privacy question? Privacy, it's a good point, and actually it is part of wider discussion. In the African IGF, we will focus on that. And there's two elements. One is privacy by design, which you can take into account. And the other one is, of course, the privacy and data protection frameworks. But other than that, it may also be subject to labeling, but I think that is more for Narelle to address.
Okay, thanks, Maarten. So with that, we'll go to Narelle, because okay. Narelle's been shopping.
I'll start talking. Oh, good. The microphone's kicked in straight away. That's great. So yes, first a quick introduction to me. My name's Narelle Clark. I've been coming to these forums once or twice, a few times over the years. I love the internet. It's this thing that in my early career, when I first met the internet, it was, oh my gosh, we could connect everything. And I was working in a university at the time. This is the early 90s. Remember then? And just looking around, when I could see that the students were testing things and gathering samples and wanting to process them and wanting to share the data and move it somewhere else and analyze it somewhere else. And yet we had to transport these things from one place to another, to another, to another. We couldn't get access to the big computers to analyze the data effectively. But I could see at that time that if we could only connect everything, and when I mean everything, I meant everything. And people thought I was completely nuts, but, started running cables and doing all sorts of things like that. But then, moving along, fast forward to today, we're finally at the point now, and it really is some 30 years later, that we are now actually at the point where we are starting to connect everything. But are we doing it with the same naivety that perhaps I had all those years ago, where of course it would be safe, of course it would be fine. Of course, all of the people that I knew that were also working on the internet, like Hiroshi and others, we did this with the best of intentions. Yet has that been what's happened? I would say yes and no. I mean, we got the first wake-up call, around about 90 with the Morris worm, when somebody thought, oh, I can copy things and I can propagate and hog and carry on. And that's the first computer virus that occurred. Anyway, oh yes, I should say these days I'm the CEO of the Internet Association of Australia. We run internet exchange points across Australia. We're an industry association. We do education advocacy on behalf of internet users, internet industry, and we want the internet to be bigger, stronger, better, more reliable and more trustworthy, especially with more IXPs. Okay, so if I press a button here, we will keep going. I wanted to talk about IoT labelling because actually a few years ago, I was working for a consumer organisation and we did a project then on typical Internet of Things type devices that consumers had. And I handed a bunch of them over to some great people at the University of New South Wales and they just hacked them all. They looked at them and went, okay, what data is being leaked from all of these devices? They had some scales, to bathroom scales to measure yourself that were connected to the internet. And they were leaking all of this biometric data. To set up the bathroom scale, you would punch in your name, you would put your weight, your height, you might even put in some other health data. And of course, it would then broadcast it in clear text across your Wi-Fi so that anybody with a sniffer could come along and collect all of this wonderful biometric data. And then it was sent off somewhere else. Excuse me. They had a Barbie doll that was internet connected. It was a Barbie-like doll. I don't think it was specifically Barbie. I'm sorry to have named them. Maybe it was them, I can't recall. But it actually at least had a button that you had to press to engage the microphone before it started to listen to everything that was going on around you and then propagating it off to the rest of the internet. So yeah, I wanted to first look at some of these basic consumer rights that we have. And these go back to, well, they're United Nations bunch of things. So there's 8 consumer rights, if I remember correctly. But I wanted to just look at 3 ones which I think are very relevant to the Internet of Things. So consumers have got the right to be informed, the right to safety, and the right to satisfaction of basic needs. And in the IoT context, I translate that to meaning we have the right to information on what the product actually does. Yeah. Information. What does it do? What does it do? How does it do it? What does it do? What's it for? The product should be electrically safe and reasonably secure. And if it does other functions such as controlling the delivery of drugs or any other sorts of things, then those functions need to be safe as well. These need to be secure in that it shouldn't be open and readily available to anybody else nearby who can just attach to it, crack it and reuse it or repurpose it for their own. It shouldn't be part of an army of bots. And the product should actually perform the functions that it has been purchased for. If you've bought it to do something, it should do that something. I mean, these are pretty fair enough, reasonable product type things. So I yes, as Raj pointed out, I went shopping. I wandered around the corner to my nearby large scale hardware mega store. I won't name their names. I'm sure those of you in the rest of the region have got similar hardware mega stores. And I thought, okay, what have they got that's IoT? So I went to everything that had smart labeling. And here we are. I'm sorry, you can't see the detail from where you're sitting. You can't quite probably see the prices on all of these, but they range from a few bucks up to, around about $100 or so. This is a bunch of smart lights. All of these things can be connected to the internet. Yeah. So that's just the lights. This stuff has really gone mainstream. And here we have the cameras. I tell you, the cameras are everywhere. There are so many different cameras. And again, there's a range of different prices. They start from, $10, $20 Australian, of course, because this was an Australian hardware mega store, up to, hundreds of dollars. And then, where's the next one? Oh, yes. And here we have action. So here on the action side of things, actually in the previous slide, there was also a vacuum cleaner on the bottom shelf. But anyway, so of course you want your house completely mapped and the information about the layout of your house propagated to the rest of the world via the internet, don't you? Yeah, no. Okay, so there are all so this action. So these are all controllers that you can use to control the taps and watering systems or external lighting functions around the place. And you love that. These are on special, $59.89 each, and you can get them by the box load. Obviously, they think they're going to sell heaps of them. Okay, so what's the next one? Oh, the next one here. So again, this is more on the action side, but let's look at what the labeling does. This is the labeling on the box. A few pretty icons and a couple of little things there that say system requirements. You need iOS or Android, and you need some sort of Wi-Fi. You need, it's really simple, okay? So just look at the icons. You can see them there. There's a timer. Oh, that's really simple too. So there's a few things that I think are missing in here. So these are the things that you plug into your power sockets, and then you can use that socket. Anything you then plug into the socket is now controllable via the internet, via an app, or via goodness knows what, I don't know. They didn't actually have that on, and this is my issue really. They don't have it on the box. How do you control these things? Who else can control them? What protocols are available? What security is there? Security? Yeah. Okay, and here's the one which I thought was the real pièce de résistance. This is the smart nightlight camera. It's a cute little teddy bear thing. I don't know, what is that thing? You're Japanese. What do you think that looks like? It's got to be. So it's a cute little thing. Yeah. And on the side of the box, it says what's in the box. It's got a nightlight camera, a power adapter, a USB power cable, an installation manual. And of course, I didn't rip the box open in the shop. I can't tell you exactly what's in there. Smartphone not included. Apparently you have to have a smartphone to do this. It says the power input, the cameras, it says it's 1920 by 1080 pixels. That's great. It does recording, and it needs a micro SD card to record it. Got system requirements and energy grid stuff and a website to go to. And the labeling, the big picture labeling is, it's just about the features. Wi-Fi, preset lullabies, isn't that lovely? And I assume, I don't know, maybe in this version you can't, but in another version, maybe you can download new lullabies. Maybe you could install an MP3 of mum singing a lullaby, or dad, or auntie, nana, or someone. The light goes on and off. It's got motion detection, two-way audio, playback, sound detection, temperature sensor, night vision, but it's not a toy. This should be operated by adults only, okay? Where's the safety information? Where's the security information? I don't see any. Do you see any? No. No. Does anybody see any security information in this labeling? Not me. Okay, so what's the next one? So here's some more. Here's some more. So I was really having fun. I managed to hold on to my wallet. I didn't spend anything, which was pretty surprising. I wanted one of each. So it shows you, this was the sort of the range of labeling quality that I saw. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you've got a one-click buttony thing to control your lights, and it really has the most simplistic labeling that barely shows you anything about the functionality, except that it's easy and you should be comforted and buy. The next one along showed a bit more instruction about how to install it. And then the final one, which was, I think, the best of this whole sorry bunch, it finally did have in its technical specification security. It actually had a line item covering security. And what their idea of security is a bunch of acronyms: WPA PSK, WPA2 PSK, WPA, which are Wi-Fi security protocols. And they've all been hacked. They're all pretty open. So it doesn't actually give me any comfort that this product has had any level of security assessment whatsoever. But that was the best of the lot. That was the only product that said anything about security at all. And then here's another one, garden light Wi-Fi controller. So on to the final observations here. Yeah, only one product that of all of that bunch, and you can see I found quite a few, only one product referred to security at all. Most of the labeling emphasizes things like ease of use, app connectivity, and it's pretty. Now, app connectivity generally means that you're opening a hole from your inside home network to the outside world. And you know for a fact that there is a flow of data going from your home network, because these, of course, are all home systems, to the outside world. And yet we have had no information. And I checked the websites of a lot of these associated products as well, and I still couldn't find anything to do with how and what processes they'd undergone in order to make security a thing. Yeah, the one mention of security was a string of really largely irrelevant acronyms as far as I'm concerned. Oh, but yeah, in all fairness, one product did include a warning about button batteries. Now that's a safety issue. Button batteries kill. Okay, so finally, yeah, security really is a layered problem. We've got to, in the IoT context, we need to think about the components of the system. Then we need to think of them as a whole, the products themselves. And then those products become part of wider things, which are services. So security needs to be examined at all three layers. And of course, it needs to do what the consumer wanted in the first place. Okay, and there we have cute animal, because people have been asking for cute furry animals in Australia. Thank you for that. They're my observations.
Thanks, Narelle. Was that IoT enabled, that little furry, nice little animal? All right. So just what we'll try and do here is we'll have, again, what we did before, have questions from the audience here, and I'll shortly ask Maarten. I'll go to the in-room audience first, Maarten. But just a very quick observation from myself, and in terms of all those different brands and the things that were put up. The interesting thing, of course, is I highly doubt any of those brands, those vendors actually even know what they're selling, because most of them are actually manufactured by someone else. And all they do is whack in a brand.
And we now have the image of lock manufacturers who are really good with mechanical locks, have moved into the electronic world. And what do they know about it?
Exactly, exactly. So that's an interesting question in itself. So I think we had a hand here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I'm Esaki from Bangladesh. I would like to share one of my experiences. That is, we carried out a research on safe internet use of children. So we found that more than 70% of the children have experienced cyberbullying once or more than one times. So what would you suggest as an alternative mechanism rather than parental control, how we could do to make a change? Thank you.
Okay, I think there's a few more hands I saw. Yeah, so we'll take those and then we'll see if we can address them together.
Thank you. Callum from United Nations. Thank you. It's a really interesting presentation. Just one thing for your radar, there's a really interesting nonprofit called DTPR. They stand for Digital Trust for Places and Routines. And they've built a kind of open source taxonomy that they've been testing in cities where, for example, if you have a sensor on a lamppost, underneath they've got like a QR code, and you scan this QR code and it'll tell you in a kind of template way, you know, who's collecting the data, what the data is for, the purpose of it, who's holding that data, when it's being deleted, even a little kind of rating system like, do you like what's happening here? And they've been testing this in quite a few cities across Europe and the US. And they've got a whole suite of, again, all open source, but all the different kind of components of sensors, cameras, how data is being held. I don't know if they've done anything on the more consumer side, but it's probably a useful one for you to have a look at, because they have this kind of taxonomy out there. That could be worth adapting for consumer applications as well.
No, that sounds great. So it's a system for disclosing the collection, and that, in that sense, at least you're being open about how the usage is of the data that's being collected.
Exactly.
I think we do need to go back to the other gentleman's point about we cannot just rely on parental safety. I think industry as a whole has to come together and ensure that the products that we are creating and using and deploying are safe and trustworthy, and that it isn't down to the weakest link. But I mean, parents do still need to be on their guard. I mean, that's been everything that every parent's ever had to do. Now, I think I should have set the scene a little bit more for Matt and Dan, because they have been working really hard on getting a solid labelling system into place. So I think
so we'll bring them in shortly. Yeah, but there's one more question from the audience here. Oh, 2, 3, whoa.
Great. I love to get an IGF where people actually interact. Yeah, go for it.
We'll take all the questions and we'll bring Dan and Matt in as well. We only have 20 minutes left, so please be brief with your comments or questions so that we can.
Hi, this is Sophia I'm also from the IAA. And I guess I had a question. It seems like there's actually quite an opportunity from the private sector to be selling their product based on the based on their security or their privacy measures. And I guess, you know, realistically, what is that opportunity? And do you think that that's something that could improve the situation that we have here? Because I don't know, personally, I'm inclined to think that at least with the privacy regulation that we have now, really companies can do anything as long as they have our consent, which isn't that hard to get when, you know, they have long privacy policies, which I'm pretty sure that all of those terms of use would have had on their.
Yeah, they would have had privacy policies and disclosure statements on their websites to do with their websites, but not necessarily privacy and disclosure statements to do with the products.
I mean, it would have just directed you to their website, which would have said, we will sell your data, you know.
Okay, we got to move it on, please.
Yeah.
I've just got a really quick question in terms of product labeling on the obsolescence of a product and the security aspect of it.
Yeah.
The Australian government has been considering, well, previously has considered where you'd be able to have a product label that would say how long security would be provided for that. I just wanted to get your take on what your thoughts are in terms of showing, as Hiroshi said as well, about the getting to a carbon neutral place. So then you also want to be thinking about obsolescence as well.
What exactly? There's
okay, let's take all the questions first, otherwise we'll lose. But was it one more, two more to go? Or where are we? Two more to go. Okay, so we'll close it off after these two. Then we'll go to our team.
I go next. Thank you so much, Jana Schmitz from AUDA. I believe that some jurisdictions have already developed and adopted cybersecurity labeling schemes. For example, Germany, where I'm from, or Singapore. So I'm interested, and this might be a nice segue to the next panelists. I'm interested in the effectiveness of such schemes and whether they have actually helped to uplift the cyber resilience of our digital economies and digital societies. Thank you.
Okay, and we had one more at the back there.
More of an observation, but most of these low-cost devices are manufactured by one company called Tuya, who New York Stock Exchange listed. Everything goes back to Asia in terms of data collection. So all of the apps are registered back to there. And as an IoT advocate, the first thing I do is flash the firmware to something that doesn't phone home.
All right. So Maarten, and to Dan and Matt, we need to give you a bit of airtime. So Maarten, can you perhaps just check if there are any questions from the audience online? If not, we'll get Matt and Dan to share some of their perspectives.
No, there is not, but I'm very happy to have Dan online, who is involved in US activities here, and then Matt has a more global perspective from Australia as well. So please move on.
All right, Dan.
Well, thanks, Maarten and Narelle, and greetings from the USA. I'm Dan Caprio. I have been working with Maarten on the IGF Dynamic Coalition, Internet of Things Dynamic Coalition, for over a decade now, and have been very active here in the US, leading the discussion of the Internet of Things in IGF USA. But for purposes of this discussion, I am currently in the US. We have an advisory board chaired by the Department of Commerce on the Internet of Things, and I'm the vice chair of that. So, and this, what I wanted to talk about directly ties into Narelle's presentation. So, and this is just in the last couple of weeks, but the Biden administration's introduced a new initiative to empower consumers to make decisions about the security of the Internet of Things. And in the US, we're calling it the US Cyber Trust Mark. It's a voluntary program enabling manufacturers to self-certify that their products meet essential cybersecurity standards. This initiative will utilize new dynamic, it's a labeling initiative for consumer products, new dynamic labels on product packaging, much like you saw with Narelle's presentation, to provide consumers with current information about the device and protecting against cyber attacks. The Biden administration announced the US Cyber Trust Mark in June of 2023, and it was led in the White House by our Deputy National Security Advisor, Ann Neuberger, and is now, it's also chaired or owned by the Federal Communications Commission and their chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel. So the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark is expected to be voluntary, incorporated into IoT devices to provide consumers relevant cybersecurity information about devices such as we've talked about today, thermostat, security cameras, baby monitors, etc. Program will allow consumers to be more informed and to select secure IoT devices for their homes and offices. What's also interesting is, so this was rolled out in June, but last month, the Federal Communication Commission in July announced a proposed voluntary consumer labeling rule. And so that's out for comment here in the US until I think that maybe the middle of September, October, but that the FCC hopes to have the labeling system in place by the end of 2024. So the program is a crucial first step, I think, in combating malware and network cyber attacks of IoT devices, offering consumers detailed information about IoT device security, can safeguard both individuals and businesses from a growing list of potential harms. The other thing I should mention is the other very active player in all of this in the US is NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And so they have a very active role to play in terms of updating their baseline IoT standards. So it's something that we've been talking about for a long time. Obviously made a little more progress in Australia, and it sounds like in Germany as well. But I'm heartened by the fact that we've taken this step in the US, and I think it's going to lead to some positive change.
Thanks, Dan. Matt, and if you also want to address any of the questions that we've heard today from the audience, please feel free to do so. And just to note, we've got about 13 minutes to go. So, and I'd like a closing round of comments as well. So not putting you under pressure, Matt, but away you go.
Okay. I'm Australian. We can talk fast. I apologize for all the international guests who can't understand me, but if this is being recorded, you can certainly slow it down and play it back at half the speed. So very interesting insights today. I think the Internet of Functions Hiroshi talked about was very important. I think it's key. A lot of people debate what IoT actually is, what smart devices are, what connected devices are, what in and is out of the remit for a number of jurisdictions and departments and agencies, things like medical devices, autonomous vehicles, are they connected devices? The EU has really led on this, and they've defined in their Cyber Resilience Act devices with digital elements. Very clean, very clear, very simple. It doesn't allow any vendors to slip through the cracks. It does need to be consumer and community driven, not one government, not one jurisdiction. It needs to be a federated model where we look at self, community, and then government. UN consumer rights are really critical. We take a global focus, so we don't just represent Australia. We're looking at harmonizing all the different certification and labeling schemes around the world. World Economic Forum in 2021, I believe it was, 2022, they released a call for a global consensus on what constitutes good baseline cybersecurity measures. The world has pretty much spoken. The ETSI EN 303645 standard hopefully will eventually become an internationally ratified standard. We need standards-driven organisations to focus on this and making sure it's consistent. Most of the world governments that we've worked with in the past, like Australia, the UK, most of the Five Eyes nations have adopted at least the top 3 of those 13 principles contained in the ETSI standard. And you do need to put cyber first. So vendors need to be put on notice that while cyber may not be sexy, it's definitely going to be a selling point in the future, particularly if we're looking at the SDGs and making sure that cyber and devices that are connected are sustainable, because you can't have devices going out of security currency and then being discarded or disposed of just because they've gone insecure or being used to do other things that they're not intended to in the first place. So there are a number of world initiatives which have been started domestically. So Singapore has been mentioned, Finland, Germany, India, and as Dan mentioned recently, the US with the FCC. So it's really good to see that there are domestic initiatives starting around the world, which will hopefully get the vendors to realize that they're not going to be able to hide behind their claims in the future, and that they do need to be tested and proven and have that product assurance and that, I guess, conformity assessment against a baseline requirement. So they do incorporate digital by default and cyber by design. Transparency and independence is critical, and ensuring that vendor claims tested are done to provide consumers with thorough product assurance. So thank you. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you, Dan. Pretty decent, good 2 bits as well, I must say. So thanks for offering your wisdom and your experience, of course. Okay, so we have 9.5 minutes left or thereabouts. We had a couple other questions from the audience, and which perhaps Hiroshi and Narelle haven't had a chance to respond to yet. So if you could perhaps just have some quick responses, if you have, or any further thoughts and comments. Maybe let's say a minute, let's say 2 minutes each. Yeah.
I want to quickly responding. We are working, making a labeling first from industry or market. Once that's going to be successful, then we introduce that to the government policy. That I say experience-based policy making, not the theoretical consideration by the academia or policymakers. Important thing is experience in the market. It's implementable or not. That's an important thing we are doing. So based on that, that is quite similar thing we're saying is the self-testing, not the government testing, not some particular organization testing. Once that is going to be making a business model, that's going to be workable. The most of the government people making rule first, making organization to doing that. That is not working. So that is we're doing the same as we will share those things. Experience first, then that is important implementable or sharing by the community or end users. That is that we are working around. And also, for example, in order to making real implementation in the commercial industrial companies, what we are doing is the kind of investor relations. You are the president. Once the stockholder saying, are you working on the cybersecurity or privacy thing? That if that's the important investment relation function, that's going to be changing a lot. So that's what we are doing now.
Okay. Narelle?
Yeah, I think Hiroshi is exactly right. There is now much more of an emphasis from the board levels of organisations to make sure that security is properly taken into account in the products and services that we offer. Indeed, in Australia, we had a major data breach last year with one of our big companies, and that company is now recorded or has been measured as being the lowest trusted brand in Australia. So while I feel sorry for them, and I think it was a likely thing to happen at some stage, the impact of these breaches on the bottom line of organisations is huge. But by the same token, there's a whole lot of damage along the way. So the risk for us,
right?
Sorry?
And reputational.
And the reputational damage, but there's harm for individuals, for people. There will be people whose personal details mean that they are now exposed to identity theft that they were not before. And I think through the Internet of Things, we have this responsibility to, yes, aim for things like carbon neutral. The garbage load of these tiny devices that, really throw away, the concept of planned obsolescence is just pull it in and take it away or throw it away. It's not going to work for us long term. We don't want to live in a mountain of garbage. So we have to be careful and more responsible about the way we produce and create and distribute these devices. And we certainly have to be more careful in how we do it all. Yeah. And actually, if I could just do one final thing, and this is an unrelated thing, I have to apologise because I meant to acknowledge, I wanted to thank the traditional owners for having us here today, the Jagger and Terrible people, and I apologise profusely for not having acknowledged that to begin with.
Thank you, Narelle, for bringing that up as well. She mentioned about the throwaway economy we live in now, and just plugging another session straight after this. I don't know in which room, but it will be on that very topic, actually. So if anyone's interested in sustainability of devices and technology from the environmental perspective, please consider attending that. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'll just get Dan and Matt to come in with maybe a minute or so of quick comments, and then I'll give the last word to Maarten. But before I start off that final round, I just wanted to thank everyone who turned up for this session today. The room did fill up finally, so my fears were fixed. Thanks for also being interactive. It was quite nice to have the interaction, and I'm sure others may have had more to offer if we had more time, but unfortunately we don't. I'm not going to summarize what everyone said, but one thing I will say is that everyone in this room probably either has a technical or a policy background or a techno-policy background. And there are people like me who know everything about nothing. But the problem, of course, is the people out there, your average consumer who may not have any of those backgrounds or contexts. And I think it makes life very difficult for them. Even, they see this fancy box with lots of certifications and logos and words on it and acronyms, and they think, this must be good. And I think that's also a disconnect we have between mass consumers or your typical consumer and, the more informed consumers which are in this room. So there's that slight disconnect. So with that, Dan, Matt, and then finally to you, Maarten, please go.
Well, thanks everyone for this panel and for your attendance. It's been a wonderful discussion. I'm actually very encouraged by the progress that we're making globally on Internet of Things labeling. I think the work that we're doing in IGF is very important, and thanks to Maarten's leadership, we've been very proactive within IGF for a very long time, and would encourage everyone to continue and be involved in making that a reality. But I think the labeling issue is one that sort of, hits home. It impacts consumers, and I hope that we can work, within IGF and with the different regional IGFs, but to begin to work on some sort of international harmonization. Matt mentioned conformity assessment. That's important. We've got a lot of work to do, so I look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you. And thanks for your attention.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. At the end of the day, it's global harmonization backed by the domestic initiatives that the different governments are taking around the world. And I think that's something that IGF needs to really focus on, putting the consumer, having a consumer-centric model that supports the sustainability goals, and ensuring that the vendors are compliant with whatever the baseline requirements are of each jurisdiction. And the only way we can do that is through harmonization. The good news is no scheme is contrary to any other scheme at the moment. So everyone's running the same race, just in different lanes. So let's hope no one trips over, and let's hope we all reach the end goal, because it's keeping consumers safe, data private, and cyber secure. So thank you.
Yes, super. Thank you all for an excellent session, and thank you, Raj, for being willing to moderate in an excellent way as always. I think what we see on a global level is three things coming together. One is privacy and data protection. When the first TVs came, you could give voice commands. All those voice commands would go to Korea, and just to improve the listening of the devices. And I truly believe that was the intent at that time, but it wasn't clear to everybody. Now we live in a time where we should be aware where data streams are going for IoT devices, and deal with that. And the second thing is the environment. Energy use of devices. Don't throw away the device because the battery is gone, or the security update is gone. And obsolescence is clearly something for which legislation is coming in place as well. Again, this is something where for sure Europe is very active, and I'm sure they will not be the only one in the end. And then to close that loop, without security, you can't get any of that right. So security is there. And in that, we need to realize that it's not the device that you once bought, but it will be updated. It will change. You won't see it on the outside, but it will change on the inside. So all these things to be taken into account. Labeling is key. We can learn from the labeling that's been going on for decades in energy on how to do it in a way that consumers can actually do something with it. And I really appreciate the awareness call that from Narelle's slides came, as well as the experience from Dan, Matt, and also Hiroshi on this matter. So with that, I know we're 1 minute over time. I won't last longer. We'll feed this back. We'll feed it into the IGF meeting in Kyoto. And our aim is to reflect it in a good practice document. If you see in the chat, I post the link, but otherwise you just search for IntGov Forum IGF DC IoT, and you will also be able to continue to track our progress. Thank you all for your contributions. Thank you all for your questions and your interest, and wish you a great day. And yes, if I would be there, I'd love to catch up with you in the hallway before I dive into the sustainability session. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Just a brief housekeeping announcements. As Maarten and Raj both said, the next session in this room is going to be Digital Environment Sustainability through Circular Economy and Sustainable Design Solutions. And we'll start at 10 minutes past 10. Please do bring your discussions and thoughts to the synthesis document at comment.aprigf.asia. That is an important instrument for us to input into the global IGF.